Next song I want to talk about is a song by Tom Waits.
Good.
Love Tom Waits. The song is Big Joe and Phantom 309. Odd title. And you hear it and you go, what on earth is Big Joe and Phantom 309? And I guess for me, this was a song that really showed me that you don't have to write conventional songs, that you can have hybrid songs that are kind of half poetry, half traditional, songs or storytelling. Tom Waits is one of those people, I think, who keeps reinventing himself. He goes through different phases. He goes through different genres. He doesn't seem to be bound by any expectations, limitations, parameters, or genres. And so this song really, for me, it sounds like a poem. It sounds like someone sitting around the campfire telling a story, and yet it's set to music, and it's just incredibly immersive. What I really learned from this song, I think, is storytelling is such a primal part of who we are. It is such a compelling, part of our lives. It's such a powerful thing. Someone says, "Let me tell you a story," and you're interested. You don't even know what it's about. You don't really care. Tom Waits, I think, takes us on these journeys, and he really puts storytelling at the heart of his songs. So for me, that was a big deal because I learned to play guitar as a kid. We've just been talking about John Mayer's song where the riff comes in and it feels like the riff sets us up and then he takes us on this journey. I was always inclined to write songs with the guitar first and make it very guitaristic. And listening to Tom Waits as a kid made me realize you could just tell a story and the music will join the party later, but the story was there as the core element, the core offering of what it was about. If we look at the breakdown of this set of lyrics, you'll see that it is linear. It's top to bottom. It doesn't have that classic kind of song form where there are repeated sections that you keep, doubling back on. He has repeatable phrases. He mentions Big Joe and Phantom 309 throughout, but it really does feel like a linear piece of storytelling top to bottom. And the other thing that Tom Waits is masterful at is he doesn't say it the way everyone else says it. He seems to deliberately go out of his way to take the cliche line, the common line, the usual phrase, and twist it enough so that you've never quite heard it that way.
Is there an example of that?
So the first one that sticks out is, I got tired of just roaming and bumming around, so I started thumbing my way back to my old hometown. And following on from what you were saying before with the John Mayer example, this idea of thumbing my way, I mean, we all know what that is because we can see it. So he paints the visual. Thumbing my way back means, hitchhiking. It's the universal symbol for hitchhiking. But he doesn't say, I started hitchhiking my way back.
Or even started making my way.
No, none of that. He just gives you the gesture. He gives you the show, don't tell principle.
Which is also about the really nice choice of a beautiful verb. And if you want a little bit more discussion on the choice use of excellent verbs, you can check out this video.
So thumbing my way back to my old hometown gives us this image of a young Tom Waits standing on the side of the road, desperate to get home, but he doesn't use the word hitching, he doesn't use the word making, he doesn't use any of that, he just gives you the visual. The second beautiful example of this is when we see Tom Waits get into the truck. So Big Joe pulls up alongside, Tom Waits, and his truck is called Phantom 309. So this is the whole point of the story. It's about Big Joe and his truck called Phantom 309. Tom Waits gets in, they strike up a conversation, and Tom Waits starts just describing the inside of the cab. And he says, I smoked up all his viceroys as we rolled along. He pushed her ahead with 10 forward gears. Man, that dashboard was lit like the old Madame LaRue pinball. Again, so much visual information. Not I smoked all his cigarettes, but I smoked up all his viceroys. He gives you the specific type or the specific brand of cigarette. The dashboard lit up like Madame LaRue pinball. It's so visual and so unusual that it sticks. And I remember hearing this as a kid going, I don't know what some of these references are, but I want to know. I want to find out because it felt so immersive. It felt like I was there in the truck with them, watching this story unfold. And then as the story moves on, it does what all good stories should do, which is it gains weight. It builds gravitas and momentum, and it starts to mean more than it did when it started out. It starts out as a simple hitchhiking story, and it turns into something far more serious with some beautiful messages, you know, interwoven. But you have this moment where Big Joe drops him off just before a bend in the road, just before a turn in the road. Big Joe says, I just got to drop you off here. And Tom Waits sort of gets out and he's a bit shocked by it. And Big Joe tosses him this coin. And so Tom Waits walks into the truck stop and he says, I ordered me up a cup of mud. Again, like, who says that? He didn't order a strong black coffee. He ordered it up a cup of mud, saying Big Joe's setting this dude up. It's like, oh yeah, okay. It's just it's so colloquial. It's so vivid. The best line in the whole thing, though, the line that really just made me fall in love with Tom Waits. When Tom Waits orders his coffee, he said, this is on Big Joe. And everyone in the diner stops, because what we find out in the story is that Big Joe is dead. Big Joe turned his wheel at that crossroads a long time ago, and he turned his wheel to save a bunch of school kids who were crossing the road. And the truck went into a skid and he crashed and Big Joe died. So we've got a ghost story that we've only just found out is a ghost story. And so he says, you know, I've got this dime that I want to buy a coffee with. And everyone says, okay, you hold on to that dime, because this happens every now and then. And the guy who owns the diner says, this happens every now and then when the moon is holding water. And this was the line. This for me was the line that changed everything, because poets for centuries have been trying to say full moon in unusual ways. They've been trying to talk about the fullness of the moon, or, you know, the roundness of the moon, the swelling of the moon, all of these different things. Tom Waits comes out and says full moon to make it a reference to the fact that we've got a ghost story in play. But he doesn't say full. He says when the moon is holding water, because we know that the moon affects water. We know that it affects the tides. We know that it relates to the female body. And there is a cyclical nature to the way we talk about phases and water and all of these different things. So again, it's the omission of the obvious statement that is the genius of Tom Waits. It's not saying the thing that you expect him to say, or the thing that most people would say. And I would say that is the big takeaway, that if you can find a way, if you can work a little bit harder to take a cliche line and just find the other way to say it, the way that no one else is going to say it, you endear yourself to your audience. And it only takes one line.
Yeah.
We don't have to have every line being a zinger. This one line bought Tom Waits 10 years of my loyalty. You know, I fell in love with Tom Waits because of this one line. Because he showed that he cared so much about his craft, that he worked hard to find this beautiful non-cliche.
I mean, that's one of the things that I tell my students all the time, is that you are no longer allowed to use cliches unless you are twisting them in some way or subverting the expectation of the cliche. So there are tons of examples from even songwriters like Taylor Swift. I think that she's a master of this. Instead of just using the cliche, she'll twist it in some way. So instead of saying time flies, she says time won't fly in the song All Too Well. And it's those little twists that take something familiar that has pre-packaged meaning, but then sort of springs it back in your face and makes it more interesting and compelling because it contains some unexpected variation. So you can do this in your own writing by even looking through a book of idioms, or like you can get the American Heritage Dictionary of Idioms, or I'm sure there are online versions.
Devil's Dictionary is a great one as well.
Okay, good. I've never seen one. I'll have to look it up. But, you find these cliches. So, for example, if you took something like the conversation flowed, okay, well, that's a cliche because it's a sort of dead metaphor. You know, it is a metaphor, but we don't really see the imagery of flowing water anymore. Also, the expectation of that cliche is the conversation was easy. Right? But ways that we can freshen up a cliche like that is saying something like, as the conversation flowed, I drowned in all the misunderstanding between us. So now it uses the word drowned, that brings back the imagery of some kind of river flowing, but also subverts the expectation of the cliche, because now it no longer means the conversation was easy, it means the conversation was difficult.
Or you could say, the conversation flowed like honey, or use something really viscous it sounds like it's going to be the cliche, but then you say something that's actually really sticky, and it gives this sense of,
I love that. And
slowly moving.
It's also, you can't quite tell whether that means it was a sweet conversation or whether it was a really slow and difficult conversation.
Or both. Yeah, sweet but slow moving.
Yeah, it's got nice ambiguity.
Yeah.